Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Kodnatai Maipo Shashi ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki jai, Shri Giridhar Lal ki, Shri Mati Vrinda Devi ki, Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki, Rantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaura Pramanandi. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, chapter entitled, I Have Done My Part. July was a good month for Srila Prabhupada's work on Srimad Bhagavatam. He continued dictating very early in the morning and in the afternoon, completing chapters 8 and 9 of the 10th canto. It was his great pleasure to do so. Working on Srimad Bhagavatam, he was completely transcendental to his physical condition, despite the accompanying heart palpitations and despite his faint voice and general weakness. Even to sit was difficult, and yet once he began working, nothing could stop him. Speaking into the hand microphone of his dictating machine, oblivious to his bodily condition, Prabhupada described patiently and methodically how Nanda Maharaj's family priest, Gargamuni, performed the name-giving ceremony for baby Krishna. In his purport, Srila Prabhupada often spoke from his personal experiences and realizations. Quote, this is the mission of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and devotees also have the same mission. One who executes this mission of para-upakara, performing welfare activities for people in general, is recognized by Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as being very, very dear to him. Tasman manusyeshu kaschan me priyakritama. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has advised this para-upakara, and he has especially instructed the inhabitants of India. On the whole, the duty of a pure Vaishnava devotee is to act for the welfare of others. sometimes sitting in the pre-dawn open air on the second floor veranda, and sometimes in the humid heat of bright afternoon, Srila Prabhupada worked, describing the limitless Vedic knowledge, just as his predecessors, the Goswamis and Krishnadas Kaviraj, had done when worshipping Krishna and Lord Chaitanya while living in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada, however, was the first great acharya to make Krishna-conscious literature available to all persons of all countries throughout the world, regardless of birth status or previous character. Even as he composed the latest chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, thousands of young men and women were working on his behalf to preach the Vedic message to the world. His disciples were, in fact, keenly aware of how Srila Prabhupada was producing the 10th canto purports in Vrindavan, and they prayed to Lord Krishna that he be allowed to continue for many years so that he could complete the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 16, a description of Jambu Dweep. Text 5 or 4?
Text 5, but it has got no purport, so maybe text 5 and text 5.
Maybe probably more than that, actually, anyway. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so I'll just read through these verses until we come to a purport. Text 5. Yovayam Dvipa Kuvalaya Kamala Kosha Vyantara Kosha Nayuta Yojana Vishala Samavatulo Yata Pushkara Patram. Translation. The planetary system known as Bhumandala resembles a lotus flower, and its 7 islands resemble the wall of that flower. The length and breadth of the island, known as Jambudweep, which is situated in the middle of the wall, are 1 million yojanas, 8 million miles. Jambudweep is round like the leaf of a lotus flower. Text 6. Yasmin navavashni navayojana sahasrayaman yashtibi Maryada Giribi Suvi Bhaktani Bhavanti. Translation. In Jambudweep, there are 9 divisions of land, each with a length of 9,000 yojanas, 72,000 miles. There are 8 mountains that mark the boundaries of these divisions and separate them nicely. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives the following quotation from the Vayu Purana, wherein the locations of the various mountains, beginning with the Himalayas, are described. Dhanuvat sangsite gyeye dvevashe dakshinotere tigani tatra chatvari chaturasram ilavritam iti dakshinotere bharatotara kuravashe chatvari kimpurusha harivasha ramyaka hiranmayani Vashani Nila Nisha Dayos, Tirashchini Bhuya Samudra Pravishtayo, Sam Lagnatvam, Angikritya, Vadrashva Ketu Mailayor, Apidano Akrititvam, Atastayo Daigyata Eva Madhye, kuchi tatvena nava sahasrayamatvam ila vritasya tu mero sakashachatu dikshu nava sahasrayamatvam sambhavet vaschitas Twilavrita Vadrashva Ketumalanam Chatustrimshat Sahasrayat Matvam Gyeyam. Text 7. Isham Madhye Ilavritam Nama Bhyantaravasham Yasyanabhyam Avastita Sarvata Sorvana Kulagiri Raju Mero Dvipayama Sammunaha Kanikabhuta Kuvalaya Kamalasya Mudani Dwa Tringshat Sahasriyojana Vitito Mule Shodasha Sahasram Tavat Antar Bhumyam Pravishta. Translation. Amidst these divisions of arches is the varsha named Ilavrita, which is situated in the middle of the wall of the lotus. Within Ilarvata Varsha is Sumera mountain, which is made of gold. Sumera mountain is like the pericarp of the lotus-like Bhumandala planetary system. The mountain's height is the same as the width of Jambudvip, or in other words, 100,000 yojanas, 800,000 miles. Of that, 16,000 yojanas, 128,000 miles, are within the earth, and therefore the mountain's height above the earth is 84,000 yojanas, 672,000 miles. The mountain's width is 32,000 yojanas, 256,000 miles at its summit, and 16,000 yojanas at its base. Text 8. Durutarene lavritam nila shweta Shringavam iti trayo ramyaka hiranyamaya kurunam vashanam maryada giraya prag ayata ubayata ksharodavadayo tvi sahasra pritava ekaikasha purvasmadutara utaro Dasham Shadi Kangshena Daigya Eva Hrasanti. Translation. Just north of Ilata Vasha and going further northward, one after another, there are three mountains named Nila, Shweta, and Shringavan. These mark the borders of the three Vashas named Ramyaka, Hiranyamaya, and Kuru, and separate them from one another. The width of these mountains is 2,000 yojanas, 16,000 miles. Lengthwise, they extend east and west to the beaches of the ocean of salt water. Going from south to north, the length of each mountain is 1/10 that of the previous mountain, but the height of them is all the same. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this regard, Madhvacharya quotes the following verses from the Brahmanda Purana. Yata Bhagavate Tuktam Bhovanam Koshalakshanam Tasya Virodito Yojam Anya Grantantare Stitam Mando De Puranam Chaiva Vyatya Samshirasagare Rahu Soma Ravinam Cha Mandala Dvigunotitam Vinaiva sarvam unnayam yojanabe datotratu. It appears from these verses that aside from the sun and moon, there is an invisible planet called Rahu. The movements of Rahu cause both solar and lunar eclipses. We suggest that the modern expeditions attempting to reach the moon are mistakenly going to Rahu. Text 9. Evam dakshinene lavritam nishado himakuto himalaya iti pragayata yata niladayo yutayo janot sida harivasha kimvarusha paratanam yata sankyam Similarly, south of Ilavatavasha and extending from east to west are three great mountains named, from north to south, Nishada, Hemakuta, and Himalaya. Each of them is 10,000 yojanas, 80,000 miles high. They mark the boundaries of the three Vashas named Harivasha, Kimpurusha Vasha, and Bharat Vasha, India. Text 10. Tataive lavritam aparena puvena cha malyavad gandamadanav anila nishadayato dvi sahasram papratatu kechamala Bhadrashvayo simanam vidadate. Please repeat. Tata eva. Exactly like that. Ilavritam aparena. On the western side of Ilavritavash. Puvenacha. And on the eastern side. Malyavad Gandamadano. The demarcation mountains of Malyavan on the west and Gandamadana on the east. Nila Nishada Ayato on the northern side up to the mountain known as Nila, and on the southern side up to the mountain known as Nishada. Dvi Sahasram, 2,000 yojanas. Papratatu, they extend. Ketamala Bhadrashvayo, of the two Vashas named Ketumala and Bhadrashva. Simanam, the border. Vidadate, establish. Translation. In the same way, west and east of Ilavritavasha are two great mountains named Malyavan and Gandamadana, respectively. These two mountains, which are 2,000 yojanas, 16,000 miles high, extend as far as Nila Mountain in the north and Nishada in the south. They indicate the borders of Ilavritavasha and also the Vashas known as Ketumala and Bhadrashva. Report by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Yeah. There are so many mountains even on this planet Earth. We do not think that the measurements of all of them have actually been calculated. While passing over the mountainous region from Mexico to Caracas, we actually saw so many mountains that we doubt whether their height, length, and breadth have been properly measured. Therefore, as indicated in Srimad Bhagavatam by Shukadeva Goswami, we should not try to comprehend the greater mountainous areas of the universe merely by our calculations. Shukadeva Goswami has already stated that such calculations would be very difficult, even if one had a duration of life like that of Brahma. We should simply be satisfied with the statements of authorities like Shukadeva Goswami and appreciate how the entire cosmic manifestation has been made possible by the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The measurements given herein, such as 10,000 yojanas or 100,000 yojanas, should be considered correct because they have been given by Shukadeva Goswami. Our experimental knowledge can neither verify nor disprove the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. We should simply hear these statements from the authorities. If we can appreciate the extensive energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that will benefit us. Jnana-timirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshuramritam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master has forced up my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Andeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vatantam Shivam Advaitam Savadutam Varijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Krishavanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Ranchakalpa Tarubhyascha Tapasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sarigaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I'm going to throw this out into the assembled devotees first of all. There's a sentence in this purport which I feel is very important. Our experimental knowledge can neither verify nor disprove the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. So what do devotees think that means? Any offers? Is it up there on the? Is it there?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. It's the third last sentence in the purport. Our experimental knowledge can neither verify nor disprove the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Which means it's like a hoaxage. Actually, is what is conceivable or perceivable, and always beyond the abilities of the world. And Sri Ramakrishna just gave an example recently of an ant. And he was talking to us that the ant doesn't really know what's going on in the room, just on his arm, it's not aware of anything else. So as compared to what's going on in our ants.
Okay, that's one explanation. Anyone else want to offer anything?
So similar to what Prabhu has said on those lines only. So like our understanding with gross senses and subtle senses, we cannot appreciate or we cannot get the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it is something like inconceivable in the sense, and this is where like one is to put his faith into practice and then one can appreciate and understand the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, with experimental knowledge, even our daily lives and all, we cannot comprehend.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I think it's a very important thing to understand, because it's not only talking about this chapter or the fifth canto, but it's talking about the whole of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada says these it doesn't say these statements. It doesn't say our experimental knowledge can neither verify nor disprove these statements, but he says the statements. So none of the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam can be verified by our experimental knowledge. So there's actually a story about a guru and disciple from not in. I don't know whether it was in the time of the Goswamis or before then, but it's not in recent times anyway. It's not in the last 2 centuries. Anyway, the disciple had been studying. The disciple was a Brahmin, and he'd undergone all of the sanskaras, and then he'd entered into like a school studying Vedanta and studying the different limbs of the Vedas. And then his guru was pleased with him, and he said, "Now I want you to I want you to travel and teach like the Brahminical science, but at the same time, I want you to study Srimad Bhagavatam. And then I want you to come back in 1 year and explain to me like what you have learned from Srimad Bhagavatam. So the student did this. He went away and he taught the different Vedic branches of knowledge. And simultaneously he was studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he came back after 1 year, and this guru said, "Okay, so what can you tell me the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam?" And so he said, "It's like, it's a very wonderful. It's the best of the Puranas. It explains the super excellence of devotional service over other forms of yoga, and it delineates the pastimes of the Lord." Like this. So it says, and this guru says, you have not understood Srimad Bhagavatam. So he says, go back and come back again in a year. And so he came back a year later, and his guru said, "Okay, so what can you tell me about Srimad Bhagavatam?" And he said, so the student said, it describes the amazing pastimes of the pure devotees, and how they're always protected by the Lord under all circumstances. And it teaches us the process by which we can also come to this platform. And then the Guru said, "No, you have not understood Srimad Bhagavatam." So then he went away. And then when he came back in the 3rd year, he was actually, he was actually mad. And he was displaying ecstatic symptoms and crying and constantly unable to control his emotions. So then his guru was very pleased. "Now you have understood Srimad Bhagavatam." And it's and this was actually verified by Lord Chaitanya when he went to associate with Ishwara Puri in Gaya. And Lord Chaitanya was playing the part of a neophyte student in his interaction with Ishwara Puri, and Ishwara Puri said that you're not qualified to study Vedanta, just chant this mantra. And he gave Lord Chaitanya the Hare Krishna mantra. And then Lord Chaitanya went away, and up until that time, Lord Chaitanya had been just manifesting his pastimes as Nimai Pandit, like a precocious teacher of grammar and logic in Navadvip. But when he came, having been given the Maha Mantra by Ishwara Puri, very quickly he developed ecstatic symptoms, and so he went back to Ishwara Puri and he said, "What is this mantra you have given me? I'm like, it's made me into a madman." And Ishwara Puri said, you have. Actually, he quotes a verse from the Bhagavatam. He quotes, I don't remember. Anyway, it's from the 10th canto, and it describes how when one hears the pastimes of Krishna with the residents of Vrindavan, one immediately displays ecstatic symptoms. So Ishwara Puri quotes that verse to Lord Chaitanya, and then he said, "I'm very pleased, my child, that you have perfectly followed the instructions of your guru." So from those two pastimes, we can understand. We can understand a little bit anyway. Obviously, we can't understand completely because we're not on that platform. But we can at least appreciate the message of those pastimes. That Srimad Bhagavatam is not about winning an argument with other people. Shikornatai Mai Pushashiki. it's not about thinking of ourselves superior to other people because we now have like the topmost knowledge. Quite the opposite. As we know, devotees who are on the topmost platform feel themselves the lowest of the low. They feel themselves like the least qualified. Their humility is unsurpassable. Or their humility is like is a constant companion of their life. And because of that humility, they're just feeling constantly blessed by the Lord's mercy in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is actually the relationship of that we're trying to attain. We're trying to attain that relationship with Krishna and Krishna's devotees and Krishna's words in the form of the Bhagavatam. We're trying to attain that platform where we have that constant humility which enables Krishna to bestow upon us the mercy that is appropriate for us. This particular Srimad Bhagavatam, which is spoken by Sutta Goswami to the sages of Naimisharanya, and then he's relating the conversation between Shukadev and Maharaj Parikshit. And this particular version of the Bhagavatam is spoken to people on many, many different levels of understanding. And some of them are Brahmavadis, and some of them are probably, some of them will have certain tendencies towards demigod worship, towards Karmakanda section of the Vedas. Some of them are very much into like Ashtanga yoga. Some of them are into like Sankhya yoga, the analytical study of the different elements, of 24 elements in the universe. So, many of the questions that Maharaj Parikshit is asking Shukadev Goswami is he's wants Shukadev Goswami to present all of the different elements of Vedic knowledge in a way which will allow the audience to pay attention to the pure devotee, Shukadev Goswami, who is actually a disciple of Srimati Radharani in his eternal constitutional position. And he's like the highest Paramahansa devotee. So when Shukadev Goswami appeared on the scene, when Maharaj Parikshit was planning to fast till death, already there were many sages there, and they all recognized Shukadev Goswami as being a Paramahansa because of his bodily symptoms, but they didn't all recognize him as being like a pure devotee of Krishna of the highest order. Like those symptoms of a Paramahansa are described in Shastra, so they would recognize him because of their knowledge of Shastra. And some of them recognized him as a pure devotee of Krishna. So basically, Shukadev is kindly speaking this knowledge about the different planets and the different islands and the different, regions of the universe, so that those sages who traveled throughout the universe, both by their mystic power, they could travel, some of them could actually travel in the sense of their bodies would travel throughout the universe. Others of them would travel in their mind throughout the universe. And there are undoubtedly many different levels of reality, of dimensions which they could travel through. So really these descriptions are for those persons. And this is not speculation on my part. I understand this because I've listened to a lot of classes by Gopi Paranjan Prabhu, and specifically in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he describes in great detail how the description Shukadev Goswami gives of the different processes of meditating on Krishna and the different processes of yoga are for the different categories of yogis and munis and rishis who are assembled to accompany, to like pay respects to Maharaj Parikshit. But they're all being given the opportunity to hear from the pure devotee. So when so that's one meditation we can have when we're reading these sections, that actually, you could call it bridge preaching. I mean, Lord Chaitanya engaged in so much bridge preaching, like on his travels to South India, he would be visiting many temples of Shiva and Durga and different demigods, and he would always be extremely respectful to all of the pujaris and their families, and he would often stay with them if he was invited to stay with them, he would usually stay with them for quite some time, and it would only be towards the end of his stay that he would actually and he wouldn't always preach, but sometimes at the end of his stay he would do some preaching to encourage them to hear the pastimes of Krishna, and if they were sufficiently philosophically astute and sufficiently learned in the Shastras, then he would prove from Shastra that Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, like he did with Venkatabhata and Prabodhananda Saraswati and Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and when he was staying in Rangashetra. So this is throughout Vaishnava history, we find that this is the activities of Krishna and his incarnations and the activities of our acharyas, and that they understand that the material world is going to continue. There's always going to be the material energy, and that even at the end of this day of Lord Brahma, and then there'll be another day of Lord Brahma, and there'll be another, and it'll always continue in some form. So there's a need to interact with the material world and with the Varnashram system, and sometimes even outside of the Varnashram system, there's a need to interact with intellectuals, with politicians, with activists, with just Lord Chaitanya was interacting with everybody basically. So this whole fifth canto, in one sense, is interacting with persons who are there may only be a handful of them on the planet now who can really understand this. There may be some yogis who do still travel to all of these regions in the universe and can actually see all of these mountains and oceans and varshas and, Srila Prabhupada said that he had no difficulty in accommodating both the Western concept of the solar system and the Vedic concept side by side. And actually, with the prominence of the internet and all kinds of IT information technology, then so many people are trained to be able to use different maps of the same reality, which allows them to approach a problem using a completely different model. So the Bhagavatam has those different models. It has those different maps by which persons on different levels of spiritual realization can come and associate with pure devotees like Shukadev Goswami. And there are many devotees in ISKCON who are developing that kind of preaching, who, like, as we know, Swarup Damodar Goswami, Srila Prabhupada encouraged him, you can speak the language of the scientists. So interact with them, make friends with them, and enable them to approach enable them to approach the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, through the language of science. So the fifth canto is enabling the rishis and yogis to approach pure devotional service through the medium of a description of the universe, a description which we don't really have access to now. But as we know from like modern cosmology, they can come up with any like description that they'll use any description possible to to explain that the universe came about by chance. The string theory, the Big Bang theory, or the multiverse theory. As long as it kind of fits in with their calculations that the universe started however many billion years ago, and that there's no need for any conscious intervention, then the scientists will create any kind of model which is far, far, far more sort of outrageous than the fifth canto. And it'll only last probably for about 10 years. Or not even that long. It'll basically last as long as they can get money for it. I mean, it's incredible how much money is invested in like quantum physics and cosmology. I mean, it's of no value. It's of virtually no value whatsoever to modern day society. But like, it's big, big money. There's like hundreds and thousands of universities and tens of thousands of people proposing different models of the universe. And basically what they do is, whenever they find something which is anomalous, whenever they find something which doesn't fit in with the current theory, then they create another kind of map or another kind of phantasmagorical dimension to try to accommodate that anomaly in their theory, and if that doesn't work, then they have to make the universe older to allow there to be enough time for that anomaly to occur, and so that's what people have to go. That's the lengths that people have to go to if they don't accept God. That's what they have. That's what they have to do. So similarly, that's the lengths we'll have to go to as well to accommodate what we read in Shastra. If we don't actually apply the teachings of sadhana bhakti in a serious way, we'll constantly have to battle with our mind and intellect to try to adjust our understanding of Shastra. But Srila Prabhupada says our experimental knowledge cannot verify the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam or disprove them. So this means that when we think we understand something, we don't understand it. We don't understand it because thinking that we understand something generally means that we're like bringing it into the realm of our intellect. We've got a picture of ourselves and our relationship with the universe and our relationship with other beings in the universe. And we don't like it when information we receive doesn't compute with that understanding of ourselves. But that's the nature of Krishna consciousness and of Bhakti Yoga, is that it'll always cause that conflict until we become pure devotees. Because when we become pure devotees, we'll just experience everything as being the mercy of Krishna. So, anyway, I'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, I got that book by Vasi. basically cosmology on trial. The last section of it is publish or perish, and it says that because basically there's 4 defects. We can make mistakes. But the final one, which is the last kind of shelter for the rascal, is the tendency to cheat. So if everything else fails, okay, well then we'll just have to fudge it here. And it's called a retraction. And it says, sometimes the clearest science writing is the most dishonest. And a detailed article in the New York Times, Fraud in the Scientific Literature, was published on October 5th, 2012, began with the following disclosure. A surprising upsurge in the number of scientific papers that have had to be retracted because they were wrong or even fraudulent has journal editors and ethicists wringing their hands. The article admits that the retracted papers are a small fraction of the vast flood of research published each year, but they offer a revealing glimpse of the pressures driving many scientists to improper conduct. Improper conduct refers to falsifying research data and results to arrive at a preconceived conclusion. The article further revealed that in 2011, the prestigious scientific journal Nature discovered more than 300 published retractions every year for the last 10 years. That's over 3,000 retractions in just one publication. So it's really rife. The cheating propensity is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, it doesn't necessarily mean that they actually initially wrote it like dishonestly, but rather the theory has changed. So if their paper stays out there in the academic circles, they'll be seen as being like not up to date, and they won't be able to get a job. So they don't want their paper, which is out of date, being out there. It's all like, yeah, it's all just money, really.
Yeah.
It's interesting now, though, there's an increasing number of scientists, because of the climate change, because of awareness of, the amount of loss of species on the planet and all of the different ways in which the ecology of the planet is being disturbed. And more scientists now are seeing that they can't really take money from organizations that are funding that kind of destruction. And so now a lot of them are joining like activist movements like Extinction Rebellion, and there's a growing number of scientists now who are starting to talk about what they call deep adaptation, meaning that we can't just change things externally using money and using technology and using government resources, but we actually need to make an internal adjustment to our mentality. So that is actually there now, and there's a
Rather than was kind of resonating the same point as they were saying in studies recently, the same conscious work that the more Krishna conscious we are, the more people will be attracted to take up Krishna consciousness, because Krishna is all attractive.
Actually, I made a statement last week in class. I said Srila Prabhupada doesn't have a very big vocabulary. Prabhupada took exception to that comment. So I was kind of I was thinking about it. And then yesterday I was listening to a class by Srila Prabhupada, and he said in that class, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot for the last week, and yesterday in a class that I listened to, Srila Prabhupada said that people just try to use big long words to avoid their cheating, basically, to avoid their cheating, and that they're all rascals. I was actually thinking about how Srila Prabhupada just uses that word rascal for everybody, and But actually, that's basically the bottom line, that until we start to experience it, everything as being Krishna's mercy, then we're still on the rascal platform. So we are rascals and they're rascals also. It's just that we've realized it. You know, Srila Prabhupada said that about his disciples, where you're all rascals. And a rascal, it's an interesting word. To me, a rascal means like a kind of child who like runs away from home, not because he's been abused, but because he like thinks that he knows better than his parents, and he just kind of like, you know, starts a street gang or something, and then ends up like in a real like bad situation, but still can't give up his pride, even though he still can't. Even if he goes to prison, whatever he happens to him, it doesn't matter how much he suffers. He still maintains this pride that he knows better. It's kind of like that.
So, on the point of as well, which is really Srila Prabhupada was giving the translation of the Sanskrit words, and there was different levels of ecstasy, I think. But then he got to the point where there was three of them. He said, "There's no English," and I was thinking, well, maybe he's being selective about what words he wants to use, because he feels a lot of them are just null and void, and so it would seem he's only choosing words which he considers are appropriate, and not words which are like speculative or, you know, or something anyway, or distasteful even. And then comparatively as well, I was just listening to us talk about Shakespeare had a vocabulary of 56,000 words, and the average person in America has a vocabulary of 5,000 words. So everything's become more and more kind of reduced. And in the Bhagavatam it says that at the end of Kali Yuga there won't be any words. They'll be grunting, because you don't really have to, if you're trying to hit someone on the head with a club some lightning and you take it to the cave, you don't have to do too much other than grunt, wallop, and then drive it off.
Yeah. Srila Prabhupada deeply understands
the spiritual emotions, then he doesn't need a big vocabulary. But we need a big vocabulary because we're not able to really process Krishna's mercy in a direct way. So we need to be able to express ourselves to others about, just like if you're going to, just like doctors, the medical profession's got an immense vocabulary because they're treating people who are sick. But if people weren't sick, they wouldn't need all that vocabulary. So Prabhupada's completely spiritually healthy. So the only vocabulary he needs is, as you say, like the words which describe spiritual emotions, and the words, as you say, that he chooses to preach. So yeah, if instead of using that one word rascal, he used there's probably at least 100 other words which you could use, different, like militants, reprobates, rebels, delinquents, there's hundreds of different words, but it wouldn't hit hard in the same way. Yeah, I think that's correct what you say.
Two small comments. So growing up in India and studying in India in uni, school, and working a bit, and then coming to UK, there were some instances when I was being told, say by teachers and seniors and all, and work people as well, not very bluntly, but this message was very clear. If you cannot convince them, confuse them. So in writing some uni paper or some project, and maybe if I may say in my working life as well, in India and other places also, sometimes this used to come, okay, there's some presentation, some meeting or something needs showing. If you cannot convince them, confuse them. And this isn't in line with the Vedic tradition or Srimad Bhagavatam or the teachings. And one small point. There's a nice video on YouTube, Life After Death, moderated by John Cleese, the British actor, in which there are in the panelists, there are 6 or 7 scientists, all from America. And they are actually, each one of them, they are quite qualified in the medical profession. And they are giving, one is speaking about reincarnation on science terms, scientific evidence. One is speaking about near-death experience, out-of-body experience. One is speaking about yoga and meditation, how it helps actually, and how it is linked with mind and the well-being. So there are 6, 7 scientists, and John Cleese is interviewing them and sharing questions and answers. So that was good to know that at least, okay, even though a small community, but some scientists are actually not just acknowledging, but doing some work on it. And if it could be promoted in schools, uni, imagine in schools in UK, there could be yoga and meditation classes, that before you start your classes, we do a bit of meditation. After your school is over, we do a bit of meditation. Go in Him, go to your house, not fighting or quarreling. Generally, it is seen, I think, in UK and India as well. Wait, once the school is over, we'll sort you out. But if that meditation practice is there, then there won't be this sort of quarrel, I imagine, or I believe.
Yeah, well, it's happening now, isn't it? So many devotees, just like we are here, we're doing a lot of yoga programs, so it will gradually filter into schools. But actually, universities are the real, that's where although Srila Prabhupada talks about Western education as the slaughterhouse of education, it's actually the universities that are the real, just like that's where the slaughter goes on. Like primary school teachers and secondary school teachers are often quite sort of sensitive towards children's needs and their emotional needs as well. And also there's often a scope in secondary school education to give children a lot of choice about what they study. But once they go to university, it's very, very quickly channeled into commercial money-making competition. And also what we've experienced, myself and Atoksha and other devotees on Sankirtan, is in the 2 weeks before students start university, they have something called Freshers Week. And then all of the big companies from multinational companies come, and they capture the students and get them to sign up in some way, some devious way. And it's often, to sign up to some kind of really degraded activity, actually, or to some, or to commit themselves to a contract right from even before they start university. And it's, But anyway, it is changing drastically now. It is changing drastically. Anyway, thank you for that illumination about if you can't convince them, confuse them. That's similar to what Atoksha just said about the suckers, isn't it? It's more or less the same thing. Okay, thank you very much. Grancha Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Gaura Premanandi. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki.